Welcome to this video on Phenomenology. I'm Andrew Chapman. I'm a professor of philosophy, and I'll be your guide. In addition to this video, I've also created a handout covering the content of the video. A link to the handout is available in the video description. It may be helpful to have this handout in front of you as you watch the video. And now on to Phenomenology. Phenomenology is a philosophical movement and research method focused on the direct examination and description of lived experience. It prioritizes the first-person perspective, seeking to understand consciousness by attending to how objects, events, and meanings present themselves to awareness. Rather than beginning with theories about the external world or adhering strictly to empirical data, phenomenology asks us to set aside or, quote, bracket assumptions and preconceptions, aiming instead to encounter phenomena as they appear. In doing so, it sheds light on the structures that underlie perception, thought, memory, and emotion. By emphasizing the intricate relationship between consciousness and its intentional objects, phenomenology aspires to uncover the essential characteristics that give shape to human experience, influencing not only philosophy, but also psychology, sociology, the arts, and other fields that engage with questions of meaning and existence. Phenomenology originated in the early 20th century, chiefly through the work of German philosopher Edmund Husserl. At the time, Western intellectual life was shaped by the dominance of positivism and naturalism, which underscored scientific methodologies as the primary means of gaining knowledge. Husserl, however, believed that these approaches overlooked the fundamental role of subjective experience. He introduced the idea of phenomenology as a, quote, rigorous science of consciousness that would examine how things are given to us in experience before we impose theoretical frameworks or empirical categories on them. This new focus responded to what Husserl perceived as a crisis in European sciences, which, in his view, had lost touch with the sources of meaning that arise from lived experience. Phenomenology's significance grew as it intersected with other philosophical currents. Martin Heidegger, a student and assistant of Husserl, moved phenomenology from a study of pure consciousness to an examination of human existence in its worldly context, or what Heidegger termed Dasein. Subsequently, thinkers like Maurice Merleau-Ponty expanded the phenomenological approach to emphasize embodiment and the ways in which perception is inseparable from the lived body. Jean-Paul Sartre engaged with phenomenology to explore freedom, responsibility, and the structures of consciousness, thus helping to shape existentialist thought. Over time, phenomenology has proved influential in a broad range of academic disciplines, from theology and literature to anthropology and nursing, as it offers a powerful framework for exploring the richness and complexity of human life. Edmund Husserl is regarded as the father of phenomenology. He proposed a method that involves, quote, epoché, the suspension of belief in the external world's independent existence, to focus on how phenomena are experienced in consciousness. He also introduced the concept of the phenomenological reduction, urging scholars to bracket their biases and judgments in order to describe the structures of experience with precision. Martin Heidegger, although initially working under Husserl's guidance, diverged by placing human existence at the center of his project, transforming phenomenology into a fundamental ontology. Heidegger argued that to understand phenomena, one must consider the ways in which human beings are always already immersed in the world and shaped by language, culture, and temporality. Maurice Merleau-Ponty expanded phenomenology further by highlighting the primacy of the body. He argued that perception is not an abstract function of a detached mind, but is always informed by our embodied perspective. Jean-Paul Sartre applied phenomenological methods to explore consciousness, freedom, and the existential dimensions of human life, linking phenomenology and existentialism in works such as Being and Nothingness. Later figures like Emmanuel Levinas incorporated phenomenological approaches in ethics, while Paul Ricoeur and Hans-Georg Gadamer combined phenomenology with hermeneutics, emphasizing interpretation, language, and historical context in understanding the meaning of experience. Phenomenology is grounded in several core principles. One is intentionality, which posits that consciousness is always directed towards something, a concept signaling that thoughts, feelings, and perceptions do not occur in isolation, but are invariably about an object or event. This relational feature of consciousness underlines that mind and world are not separate entities, but are interconnected through acts of experience. Another principle is the epoché, which calls upon the interpreter to suspend or bracket assumptions about the natural world, everyday beliefs, and preconceived theories. This suspension aims to direct attention to how phenomena actually appear in consciousness, thus fostering a fresh mode of seeing. Closely linked to the epoché is the phenomenological reduction, a methodological approach that attempts to peel away layers of interpretation and identify the essential structures of experience. Through this reduction, the phenomenologist hopes to arrive at a level of description that captures the core features of a phenomenon, free from unwarranted assumptions. The concept of the life world, introduced by Husserl, underscores the pre-reflective environment in which all experiences take place. This life world is constituted by cultural traditions, language, social interactions, and personal history, factors that shape how individuals perceive and make sense of reality. Phenomenologists explore how these background contexts function as the implicit grounding of all conscious life. As phenomenology evolved, an existential and hermeneutic turn became more pronounced. Thinkers such as Heidegger, Sartre, Gadamer, and Ricoeur stressed that interpretation, history, and the question of being form integral parts of any phenomenological analysis. They argued that describing experience cannot be separated from interpreting its existential significance, nor can it be divorced from the interpreter's own historical standpoint. Although phenomenology began as a philosophical inquiry, it has found applications in various real-world contexts. In psychology, phenomenological approaches shaped qualitative research methods designed to capture individuals' subjective experiences, feelings, and understandings, offering a counterpoint to experimental and behavioral methods that might fail to address inner meaning. In therapeutic settings, practitioners influenced by phenomenological or existential frameworks center on clients' lived experiences, emphasizing authenticity, personal responsibility, and the search for meaning. Educators draw on phenomenological insights to craft learning experiences that engage students' embodied perspectives, rather than reducing education to abstract memorization or purely instrumental ends. In sociology and anthropology, phenomenological methods guide researchers in exploring how cultural practices, social norms, and institutional structures are experienced and interpreted from the inside by those who participate in them. By focusing on the everyday life world of communities, phenomenologists provide nuanced accounts that go beyond superficial or purely quantitative analyses. Phenomenology also intersects with design, architecture, and urban planning, as understanding how people inhabit spaces can inform more human-centered environments. The approach is similarly relevant in healthcare, particularly in nursing, where an awareness of patients' subjective experiences can foster empathetic care and better communication. In each of these fields, phenomenology's refusal to overlook the richness of subjective life encourages a deeper recognition of how people actually experience and interpret their worlds. Within phenomenology, there has been considerable debate about its scope, methodology, and ultimate aims. One prominent discussion contrasts Husserl's original ambition for a presuppositionless description of consciousness with Heidegger's existential emphasis on questions of being. Husserl initially believed that a careful descriptive method rooted in the epoché could yield universal structures of conscious life. Heidegger, however, argued that human existence is inherently interpretive, shaped by the existential predicament of being in the world, such that no act of reflection can be fully divorced from historical, linguistic, and practical contexts. This tension highlights the question of whether phenomenology should remain a purely descriptive enterprise or whether it inevitably leads to existential and hermeneutic inquiries. Another debate focuses on the role of embodiment and intersubjectivity. While Husserl's phenomenology concentrated heavily on internal acts of consciousness, later phenomenologists like Merleau-Ponty contended that to describe experience fully, one must place the lived body at the center. Intersubjectivity also became a central concern, prompting discussions on how individual experiences relate to collective or shared worlds. These debates show that phenomenology contains multiple strands, some more empirical or descriptive, others existential and interpretive, still others engaged with social and political phenomena, yet all share a deep concern for understanding how consciousness discloses reality. Phenomenology faces significant external criticisms, particularly from scholars who doubt whether introspective or descriptive methods can stand on equal footing with the explanatory power of the natural sciences. Critics charge that phenomenology's emphasis on first-personal accounts risks yielding subjective or idiosyncratic findings that are difficult to generalize or verify. They also question whether bracketing preconceived notions is truly feasible, suggesting that any purportedly pure description may be influenced by philosophical or cultural assumptions. Responses from phenomenologists highlight that phenomenology is not meant to replace empirical science, but to supplement it by revealing the fundamental conditions that make science, interpretation, and meaning possible in the first place. Proponents argue that all knowledge is rooted in lived experience, so understanding how consciousness operates is indispensable for a coherent epistemology. Phenomenologists also emphasize that the rigor of their method lies in its reflective process, which demands continuous scrutiny of one's assumptions in order to articulate the structures of experience as faithfully as possible. Moreover, they maintain that intersubjective validation, that is, comparing descriptions among different interpreters, can offer a check against purely subjective or arbitrary conclusions. Phenomenology's influence reaches beyond philosophy into disciplines concerned with the complexities of human experience. In psychology, it informs qualitative approaches such as interpretive phenomenological analysis, or IPA, which scrutinizes how people make sense of major life events, illnesses, or social challenges. In sociology and anthropology, it underpins ethnographic methods that seek an insider's perspective on cultural practices and the meaningful worlds they create. Literary criticism has harnessed phenomenology to investigate how readers engage with texts, how narrative structures guide perception, and how language shapes the reader's imaginative experience. In design, architecture, and other creative fields, phenomenological concerns with embodiment and spatiality yield insights into how built environments affect well-being and social interaction. Even in disciplines like management studies or organizational behavior, phenomenology has been employed to examine employee experiences, leadership dynamics, and cultural values within workplaces. Across these domains, the shared principle is an insistence on the irreducible significance of how things appear to conscious, embodied agents. Phenomenology continues to thrive in contemporary philosophy and interdisciplinary research, often intersecting with hermeneutics, post-structuralism, and cognitive science. Philosophers who focus on consciousness, intentionality, and the embodied mind remain deeply influenced by phenomenological methods, and there is ongoing dialogue with neuroscience regarding the, quote, hard problem of consciousness. Questions about technology, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence have propelled new research that investigates how digital devices mediate or transform lived experience, raising concerns about presence, disembodiment, and authenticity. Similarly, ecological phenomenology has emerged to explore how natural environments are experienced, rethinking the human-nature relationship in light of urgent environmental issues. These developments show that phenomenology remains adaptable and relevant, capable of engaging with the changing landscapes of modern society. Phenomenology's legacy is profound in shaping 20th and 21st century thought. Its reorientation of philosophy toward the lived dimension of consciousness has influenced existentialism, postmodern thought, and a range of hermeneutic and critical theories that emphasize subjectivity, historical context, and interpretive practices. Phenomenological vocabulary and concepts have entered discussions about ethics, aesthetics, politics, and psychology, encouraging thinkers to approach human problems through the lens of experiential meaning rather than abstract rationalism or reductive empiricism. Philosophers such as Emmanuel Levinas extended phenomenology's concern with intersubjectivity into the ethical realm, proposing that our primary relation to others must be framed in terms of responsibility and care. Feminist theorists, critical race scholars, and queer theorists have used phenomenological perspectives to investigate how identity, power, and oppression are lived and felt in everyday contexts. By foregrounding experience as inherently shaped by embodiment, social environments, and personal history, phenomenology paved the way for analyses that challenge universalizing discourse. Its presence in literature, film, and the arts is equally notable, informing ways of depicting interiority and capturing the fullness of sensorial reality. These wide-ranging applications underline phenomenology's enduring significance as an approach that insists on the fundamental importance of how things appear to conscious subjects. In conclusion, phenomenology, founded by Edmund Husserl and developed by figures such as Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, and Sartre, stands as a pivotal movement in modern philosophy. It revitalized inquiry into consciousness and experience by urging a fresh encounter with phenomena as they appear, rather than filtering them prematurely through scientific or common-sense interpretations. Though sometimes criticized for its subjectivity and resistance to empirical verification, phenomenology has demonstrated that lived experience, far from being a minor or derivative aspect of reality, is in fact central to understanding how people inhabit, interpret, and construct their worlds. By attending carefully to intentionality, the epoché, and the irreducible role of embodiment and intersubjectivity, phenomenology opens a pathway to knowledge that complements, rather than competes, with empirical science. Its profound influence on fields as diverse as psychology, sociology, literary studies, design, healthcare, and ethics confirms that the lived dimension of life cannot be dismissed. Phenomenology thus endures not as a static doctrine, but as a continually evolving practice of thinking and perceiving, guiding researchers and philosophers toward a deeper insight into the fabric of human existence.